Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, with us every Thursday at this time to offer her legal expertise by providing general advice on the latest hot topics. She has experience that spans more than 25 years in the area of property and commercial law, and she is with us this morning right now. Morning to you, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Despina. So it's been all over the headlines recently. Local businesses have been displaying no mask, no question signs, and it has obviously caused a lot of drama. So we're going to break down what are the current laws, both in New South Wales and in Queensland, because a lot of people forget they are different, unfortunately, especially if you live on the border. So, Des, what is the update?
So it's very topical, and I've heard a lot of people talk on the radio and other avenues and platforms about what is happening, particularly in New South Wales, because we talked about Queensland a couple of weeks ago, and all of that still remains the same. I've checked the regulations recently. So in New South Wales, it actually is quite different in a lot of different ways, and I think that everybody really needs to understand what they need to do and how they have to comply. Because, well, for one thing, you can get issued with on-the-spot fines. As a person, individual, a patron in a place, and even the business owners can be fined. So it really is important for people to understand, well, what are the rules? Because they keep changing all the time, don't they? So it's hard to keep up.
And the good thing for us is that you've spent quite a deal of time researching these rules, and you did a lot of work too, because there's a lot to get through.
There is.
You did the work for us, which is great.
You did. Because I didn't even realise that something updated until this morning, and I just happened to stumble across it in a news article. What if people aren't picking up the paper?
Yep.
Exactly, yes. So it is, I have to say, a little bit easier maybe for someone like myself to read through these pages and pages of information and rules, because as lawyers, we're trained to do research, to read, to understand the rules, and then to be able to apply them to the practical world that we live in and see if they are relevant for you or not. So that's what I did, and there were pages and pages, as you said. So let's start from the beginning. I think if we can just focus on, for today, non-residential indoor areas, because when I had a look at the regulations, there are different rules for different places. You've got rules for non-residential indoor areas, such as supermarkets, cafes, restaurants. Then you've got rules for outdoor areas. Then you've got rules for airports. Then you've got rules for residential buildings. Then you've got rules for common property areas. So it will be far too difficult, of course, to try and canvass all of that in this short space of time. But particularly what I want to focus on, and the reason why, to focus on non-residential indoor areas, is to help business owners who I think, particularly in our local area here in Tweed Heads and Cabarita and other places, they may be struggling a little bit to understand what do they need to do and what is best for their business. So let's get into it. So the non-residential indoor areas, like I said, first of all, we're talking about retail or business premises. Okay, so examples, supermarkets, shopping centres, banks, post offices, cafes. So all of those places, that's what we're going to talk about today, and how the rules apply. And what we're talking specifically about is wearing a face mask. Yeah, because a couple of weeks ago, or was it last week, we talked about the QR codes?
2 weeks ago or
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's so much to now comply with and understand. So this is just about, and it is very important, very topical, wearing a face mask. What do I need to do when we're talking about non-residential indoor areas? So the number one rule is now we have to wear them, which we have done for a while. What has changed in the last week, particularly in New South Wales with these rules and regulations, is, okay, I have to wear a face mask in certain areas, most areas, unless you're in home, obviously in your own home, and in your own car, is the exceptions. And what do I need to do if I fall within an exception? How do I do fall within an exception if I do? Or how do I obtain an exemption? And do I need to prove that I have that exemption? And who do I need to prove it to? So these are the critical changes that have happened in the last 6-7 days for New South Wales residents and business owners. So we talk about the exceptions. So interestingly, when I went through these pages on the website, and this is why I suppose it's easier for someone like me, but other people would find it very difficult to navigate through all of these pages, because when you go to certain sections that talk about refusing entry to premises, okay, and that was the first important section that I came across. Okay, what happens if I'm refused entry, and who can refuse entry to me? So if you refuse to wear a mask, the occupier of the premises may refuse entry to that person straight out because of the rules now in New South Wales. And what it specifically says though on the New South Wales government website, interestingly enough, is that it is a matter for the occupier of each premises to exercise their own judgment in managing their business. So that's pretty difficult, isn't it, to navigate all of this as a business owner?
And that would mean that each business owner would have a different view of things, and therefore may have a different way of operating their business in terms of asking people about masks and how it actually works within their business. So you could go to two different businesses and be received in two different ways.
Exactly. And I think from reading the government website, it is putting the liability back on the occupiers, the business owners of premises, and they can be fined up to $55,000. That's what I understand, for non-compliance. So when it says they've got to exercise their judgment, it says, look, what's appropriate for their premises and for the well-being of their staff and customers. So I think what they're really saying is, well, it depends on what type of premises we're talking about. It can be different if it's a cafe to, say, a Bunnings store, for example. So they're quite different types of indoor non-residential premises. So I think the reason for this is saying, look, exercise your judgment, understand the rules, because it does go on to further say that to be able to exercise your judgment, you've then got to understand
You've got to know
what are
the
the
rules. You've got to be able to find them and follow them. Yeah.
Exactly. And then under that, it talks about the exceptions. So interestingly enough, when I clicked on the exceptions link on the website, it took me to the exceptions that have nothing to do with wearing face masks.
Perfect.
So it talked about checking in. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, do I have to wear a face mask? So, it's going to be really hard for people out there to try and navigate. I had to keep reading and finding what I was looking for, which was, okay, lawful reasons for not wearing a face mask. Right, for non-residential indoor areas we're talking about. So we've got the public health order about wearing a face mask. When do you not have to wear it? What's a lawful reason? So it says there that you do not have to wear a mask if you have a physical or mental health illness or condition or disability that makes wearing a mask unsuitable. So I'll just repeat that so people can understand it. It specifically says you don't have to wear a mask if you have a physical or mental health illness or condition or disability that makes wearing a mask unsuitable. And then they've got examples, which I'll mention so people can put it into context. Well, what does that mean? So, for example, skin condition, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago in Queensland. Yes. Intellectual disability, autism, or trauma. So post-traumatic stress disorder is a condition. And in those circumstances, it says, okay, you don't have to wear a mask. And interestingly enough, I met with someone yesterday who was telling me they had an elderly person who had a hearing aid. And when they were trying to put a mask on, they couldn't fit it properly because of the hearing aid behind their ear. So would that qualify? Potentially, I don't know. But certainly there could be all sorts of examples that might fall within those categories. And then this is the interesting bit that I want business owners to really listen to in terms of, well, maybe this might be something you want to put up as a sign in your store as well. And it says here that please be respectful to people who are not wearing a mask, as the reasons are not always obvious or visible. And that's true, isn't it, based on what I've just said?
Yeah.
So there's been I've heard a lot of people being discriminated potentially and victimised, yelled at, and people are in tears because they go out in public. They may very well have a lawful excuse for not wearing a mask based on the rules, and then people are yelling and screaming saying, you're not wearing a mask, who do you think you are, this is terrible, wear a mask. And it's all very traumatic, and people are taking it upon themselves to be police officers when they really shouldn't be, because as the government website says itself, The reason for not wearing a face mask may not be obvious because it relates to a trauma or a mental health condition that you just can't see visibly, can you? If you've got a rash on your face or a skin condition, sure, you could see that, couldn't you? But you certainly can't see or be aware of a mental health condition.
Of course. So as a business owner then, what can we do legally? Politely ask them what condition they have?
So this then took me to the next step, and this was the
The next hyperlink. Yes.
And this is the critical change as well in New South Wales. So now in the last 7 days, they've changed it. In the last 6-7 days, you now have to have proof, and you have to carry that proof with you. And we need to talk about what that proof,
Yes.
what is it, what type of proof are we talking about, and who would you have to actually supply it to and provide. So this is the critical change, and we need to talk about this a bit more because I have heard stories recently and some horror stories about people saying, look, I do have an exemption, and some people, well, I don't care what you have, you're not coming in the store. And the person said, well, I do have a certificate, and they go, I don't care. So people need to really understand, and this is what we're doing today. We're sort of dispelling all of the myths, I suppose, and giving people clear answers to move forward.
Yes. Okay. So more on Talking Law. We'll be answering those questions with Despina Priala coming up next on Radio 97.